Hi, I'm Bobby. Since I've been between freelance jobs, I haven't had as much to do, and my gym has closed down as well, meaning that a lot of the regular socialization I've had is absent. My wife and I are searching for new places in our community that we want to be involved in, but in the meantime, I've noticed that I've been filling up the quiet spaces in my life a lot more to compensate for what's missing. It all started out with taking a regular podcast walk. I started doing it when I was going through my group therapy this summer. My anxiety was just so intense that I couldn't bear to stay still. So every afternoon I'd go and I'd listen to an episode of the podcast I was binging at the time, Maintenance Phase. It's really great. And walk or run a few miles out in the afternoon heat on the trail next to the river. This led to me running a lot more and eventually getting back into race shape, which is fantastic. But at some point, the habit started to sour a bit. I was listening to podcasts even when I wasn't running, which I know is normal, but I haven't always been the kind of person who needed to have some kind of noise all the time. I've noticed that this is a bad pattern of mine, and it isn't a healthy way for me to cope. So yesterday, I decided to do a contentless day. No YouTube, no podcast, just my actual thoughts, and oddly enough, the inspiration to do it came that morning at 2:15 a.m., I had had trouble sleeping off and on throughout the year, which I attribute to a combination of trialing medications, anxiety attacks, and just getting older. But this one was different. I've been going to sleep really early, and instead of being able to fall back to sleep within the hour like usual, I was up for 4 hours. Just me and my own thoughts. And honestly, it was really great. I worked through some stuff. I even found some peace and tranquility in having no responsibilities or input since, it was the middle of the night. I just decided to keep going the rest of the day. Now, I know that at least since the pandemic, dopamine detoxes have been kind of a fad. I even read that Cal Newport book a few years ago, the one whose title that I can't remember right now, about how our devices are bad and we function better when we have fewer distractions. Makes absolute sense. Yeah, I totally get it. I have to say, though, that I don't know how I feel about a lot of that stuff. Life just isn't as simple as most of the people who tout things like dopamine detoxes usually seem to sell it as. And speaking of selling, they're usually selling you something too. There's not really a glut of evidence that I've seen to support anything with detox in its name anyhow, much less one involving a chemical that, to my understanding, is released when we anticipate pleasure, not when we receive it. But, what do I know? Nothing. I know nothing. Either way, the idea of taking a break from devices at least every now and again seems sound to me, honestly. It seems like a good idea, like I said. Despite all that, though, I definitely felt better yesterday. I was able to work on an editing project for a client uninterrupted for several solid hours at a time, and I got much more done than normal just by leaving my phone in another room and allowing myself to just be there with myself and my work. At times, I'd stop and just look out the window, and that was pretty great, too, honestly. There's, pretty trees and shit, I don't know. I took a couple of walks when I needed a break without my phone and cooked dinner with my wife. Instead of turning on the TV afterwards, we both just read books and slept really well. It just took a lot less discipline than I thought it would, honestly. After about half the day, I was enjoying the sounds of just living without so much input. I was getting things done more easily and enjoying the process more by letting myself just be occupied with one thing at a time. Meditation, which I've been trying to do more, was much easier too, because by the time I went out in the afternoon to do it, I wasn't fighting nearly as much noise in my brain as usual. It's pretty great. So you've heard all this before. You know that we're all probably too distracted. It seems like every day I have to honk at whoever is in front of me at a stoplight when it turns green so they look up at the road instead of down at their phone, which is really annoying, by the way. Yes, I'm talking to you. You've heard all the moralizing and preaching. You've heard Jonathan Haidt or Cal Newport or somebody else telling you that this stuff is just more than we're wired to handle as people. Jonathan Haidt is really annoying too, by the way. Is it just me? But I don't want to talk about what's moral or bad. I think the issue of our attention and phone addiction and all of that is probably just a hell of a lot more complicated than most of the pundits say it is. I think there are really great things about social media and technology and being as connected as we are to people that we otherwise wouldn't ever have a chance to meet and talk to. I think there are probably a lot of people who are less lonely and more fulfilled every day because they have access to things that soothe their minds when they need it. There's a lot of other things, like a lot of other kinds of noise in the world too. After all, cars and helicopters and bad news and just the general shittiness that is life in 2024 that deserve to be drowned out sometimes. Like, did you realize child labor in the US has increased by almost 500%? Bombs never seem to stop getting dropped. Rich people keep getting more absurdly rich while poor people keep getting poorer. And working still just sucks. I bet you want to drown me out now. And as important as it is to stay connected and aware of all the stuff happening in the world, there's really just only so much of that stuff that any regular person is designed to be able to process. Our world has expanded so much with the internet, and there's just so much more to be aware of now, but it often mostly serves to create stress and anxiety that we can't do anything about at the moment. There's a balance I think everybody needs to strike, and I think it changes all the time for every person too. There's a lot of stuff that needs fixing in the world, absolutely, but if you're a nervous wreck, you're no good to anyone anyway. So you got to take care of yourself. I live in an old neighborhood. The houses were mostly all built in the 1920s, and the trees are old, gnarled, and massive. There are several houses nearby with big, interesting gardens that give a lot of color and life to our little corner of the world. It's really a very pretty little spot, and yesterday I noticed that stuff. It was really nice. The problem with distraction, scrolling, constant podcasts, or numbing or drowning out with whatever method, it isn't selective. Just like if you're trying to drink away your problems with alcohol, you don't get to choose what you're distracted from, only what you're distracted with, because all the knobs on the stereo get turned down at once. The reason it felt so great to go without all that content yesterday wasn't necessarily because all the stuff I was listening to or half watching was bad or anything. It's just that being present is really the only place where your actual life is taking place. And staying distracted from it all the time is a surefire way to miss it. There's a lot of bad that comes in with the good, but that's just how it goes. I'm writing this part now, a few days later, because I got overwhelmed last week and just didn't end up making this video. I've kept up with consuming a lot less content though, and even though I'm still having like a slow time at work, I've taken more time to spend with friends and had a lot of success with keeping my head out of my phone. It's been nice. Look, I mean, again, you've heard all this before, but sometimes it bears repeating, you know? Like, when you can break free from the manufactured FOMO of social media companies and advertising firms, it's often staggering just how much life is already built into, life already. My own life is the only one that I can actually live, and I don't want to miss out on any of it if I can help it. I don't know. Anyway, go take a walk or something. I'll see y'all a bit later.